You're 13. It's your wedding night, but husband is already in the coffin. Now you must marry his ghost. Rain drums on the roof as you stand in a red silk dress. Too big, borrowed from a cousin who married a living man. Your feet are bare. Your hair is pinned with fake pearls that itch. In your hands, a cup of cold tea you're supposed to offer to your groom. But there is no groom. Only a wooden box in the next room, freshly nailed shut, smelling of pine resin and blood. He died 2 days ago. Fever, they said, 18 years old. He never met you, never saw your face, but his parents paid your family 10 silver taels for the match. The contract was signed when you were 6. Now you must marry him despite his death, 2 days ago. A village elder places a spirit tablet in your hands. Smooth wood, black ink, his name carved deep. Bow, he says. You kneel, press your forehead to the floor, hard. Again, again. Each bow seals your life to a dead boy you never knew. This isn't a story, it's history. This practice had a name, minghun, ghost marriage. During China's Ming dynasty, year 1368 to 1644, and Qing dynasty, year 1644 to 1912, it was common, not rare, not secret. Families arranged these unions openly, sometimes even before the boy died, just in case. Why? Because in traditional Chinese belief, a man who died unmarried couldn't join his ancestors in the afterlife. His spirit would become a gehun, a lonely ghost, restless, dangerous, bringing sickness or ruin to his family. The only way to calm him, give him a wife. Not a symbol, but a real live girl. You! From tonight on, you live with his parents. You cook for them, clean their house, worship at his grave. You will never marry again, never have children of your own. If you look at another man, you're accused of betraying the dead. If you run away, your family's honor is ruined. And the marriage is legal, binding, recorded in clan genealogies. Some girls were married to corpses so young they couldn't even walk, carried to the altar in their mother's arms, tiny hands pressed to a spirit tablet. Tonight, you're expected to sleep in the marital chamber with the coffin at the foot of the bed, just for one night, to complete the rite. A chaperone sits by the door. You don't undress, you don't cry. You stare at the ceiling and wonder, is he watching? You are alive, but your future is buried. Ghost marriage wasn't born from horror, it was born from order. In imperial China, the family wasn't just a unit of love or kinship, it was a cosmic machine. Every birth, every death, every marriage had to feed the balance between the living and the dead. Ancestors watched, spirits are judged, and a son who died unmarried, he was a broken gear, a threat to the whole system. That's where minghun came in, not as a superstition, but as a repair tool. The practice dates back at least to the Han Dynasty, 26 BCE, 220 CE, but it exploded during the Ming and Qing eras, when Neo-Confucian ideals tightened their grip on society. Filial piety, duty to parents and ancestors became law, not just custom. A son's obligation was to carry on the family line, in this world and the next. If he died before fulfilling that duty, his parents had to find a bride for him after death, or risk his soul turning vengeful. But here's what made ghost marriage uniquely cruel. It only worked if a living girl paid the price. Boys were rarely ghost married to dead girls. Why? Because daughters didn't carry the family name. They didn't inherit land or ancestral rights. A dead daughter was mourned, but her spirit wasn't seen as dangerous. A dead son, however, was a crisis. So families turned to the most vulnerable. Poor girls, orphaned girls, or daughters from indebted households. In some regions, ghost brides were chosen by spirit mediums. Women who claimed the dead boy appeared in dreams and named his bride. In others, it was pure economics. A starving family might accept 10 taels of silver enough to feed them for a year in exchange for their daughter's future. The ceremony looked like any wedding. Red lanterns, drums, a bride in red silk. But instead of a groom, the bride bowed to a spirit tablet or a coffin. Sometimes the groom's younger brother stood in as a proxy, but the marriage wasn't to him, it was to the corpse. Once sealed, the girl's life changed instantly. She moved into her dead husband's home, took his family name, was expected to perform daily ancestor worship, kneeling before his tablet, offering tea, burning paper money so he'd have wealth in the afterlife. And she had to stay chaste, forever. Not because of religion alone, but because any child she bore would belong to the dead man's lineage, not her own bloodline, and certainly not to any new husband. If she tried to remarry, the original family could sue to block it. Concubines' legal records show dozens of cases where ghost brides were dragged before magistrates for breaching marital fidelity to a corpse. This wasn't fringe behavior, it was reinforced by the state. Local officials praised families who upheld minghun. County gazetteers listed ghost brides alongside war heroes and scholars. Memorial arches, Pai Fang, were erected in their honor, inscribed with phrases like "faithful to the unseen." The dead got peace. The living got a cage. Once the wedding rites ended, the real sentence began. As a ghost bride, you weren't a wife. You were a legal anomaly, not widowed, because you'd never been married to a living man. Not single, because your name was now tied to a dead boy's lineage. You existed in a limbo. The Qing legal system called Weihun, not fully married, yet you bore all the obligations of a wife with none of the rights. Most critically, you could not inherit. Under Qing inheritance law, only sons could carry on the family line. But a ghost bride had no son because she had no husband to father one, even if she later bore children with another man, a rare and risky act. Those children belonged to his lineage, not the dead husband's. The ghost's family could, and often did, refuse to recognize them. That meant no ancestral rights, no burial in the family plot, no claim to land or property. For a peasant family, that was economic erasure. Worse, you had no legal recourse. If your in-laws abused you, forced you to work like a servant, starved you, or sold you off, they faced almost no consequences. Why? Because you weren't their daughter-in-law in the eyes of law. You were a ritual dependent. Court records from 18th century Fujian show ghost brides petitioning magistrates after being beaten for refusing to kneel at the spirit tablet 3 times a day. The rulings, usually, return to your husband's household and fulfill your duty. The state didn't protect you, it enabled your confinement. And the pressure came from everywhere. Neighbors watched, clan elders judged. Village gossips whispered, "Did you see her smile at the wheat merchant? Shameless, her husband's bones aren't even dry. Even your body wasn't your own." Sexual purity was non-negotiable, not because of personal morality, but because your chastity maintained cosmic order. If you defiled yourself, you didn't just betray a memory. You risked unleashing the dead man's spirit, as the ghost could bring plague, drought, or stillbirths to the village. That belief wasn't just held by peasants. Magistrates, scholars, and even county officials recorded cases where unexplained misfortunes were blamed on a ghost bride's moral lapse. Some families took it further. In extreme cases, if the dead husband's lineage needed an heir, they'd pressure the ghost bride to adopt a nephew or quietly arrange for her to sleep with a male relative. The child would then be presented as the dead man's posthumous son. Officially, it was lineage preservation. Unofficially, it was sanctioned exploitation. Hidden behind phrases like continuing the ancestral flame. The irony, the very system that claimed to honor the dead, trapped the living in silence. Your name might appear in the clan register, but your voice, your pain, your dreams, those were buried long before your body would be. Her name was Chen A-Yue. She was 16. And in 1798, she did the unthinkable. She ran. A-Yue had been ghost married at 14 to a boy who drowned in the Pearl River. His family, wealthy salt merchants in Guangdong, took her in, not as kin, but as a custodian of his memory. She woke before dawn to sweep his shrine. She ate last, she spoke only when spoken to. When her mother-in-law caught her humming while folding laundry, she was locked in the grain shed for 3 days. Then came the day they told her. A cousin would visit her room that night. Not to talk, but to secure the lineage. She didn't wait for dark. At noon, while the household napped, A-Yue slipped out the back gate with nothing but a straw hat and the copper hairpin her real mother gave her before the marriage. She walked 50 li, over 20 miles through rice paddies and bandit-patrolled roads, until she reached a Christian mission station run by a Portuguese priest near Macau. There, she begged for sanctuary. Her story survives because the priest wrote it down in broken Mandarin, translated into Portuguese, later archived by Jesuit scholars. In it, A-Yue didn't call herself a victim. She called herself unmarried. She insisted she'd never truly wed. I bowed to wood, she told the priest. Not a man. But her in-laws reported her as a fugitive. Under Qing law, a ghost bride who fled could be charged with disrupting ancestral rites, a crime that carried corporal punishment or forced return. Local magistrates issued a warrant. The mission hid her for months, but when officials threatened to burn the chapel, the priest made a choice. He smuggled her onto a cargo junk bound for Batavia, modern Jakarta. She vanished from Chinese records after that, but her case wasn't unique. Missionary diaries, county court logs, and private letters from the 18th and 19th centuries mention dozens of ghost brides who fled, protested, or quietly resisted. One girl in Zhejiang feigned madness so convincingly she was declared unfit for ritual duty and sent back to her birth family in disgrace, but alive. Another in Anhui swallowed ink made from cinnabar, hoping to sicken herself into release. She survived, but went blind. Most were erased, their names struck from clan registers, their births unrecorded, their choices branded as shame. But A-Yue's act of defiance reveals a hidden truth. Not all ghost brides accepted their fate. Some fought, some ran, some whispered no in the dark, even if history never heard it. And in a system designed to turn girls into silent vessels for the dead, even one no was revolutionary. In 2019, a dealer in a Beijing antique market sold a small wooden spirit tablet for 200 yuan, about $30. It was worn at the edges, the lacquer chipped, the ink faded. But if you held it to the light, you could still read the inscription. Wife of Huang Ming Day, of virtuous silence, wed in the year of the ox. No birth name, no age, just wife. The buyer, a collector of Qing-era curios, placed it on his shelf beside teacups and inkstones. He didn't know her story, didn't need to. To him, it was just a decoration. But somewhere her story lingers, because ghost marriage never fully disappeared. In rural parts of China, especially Shanxi, Shanxi, and Fujian, the practice persists in modified forms. As recently as 2016, police in Shanxi uncovered a black market where the bodies of dead bachelors were married to the corpses of young women, often grave-robbed or purchased from impoverished families. The motivation? Still the same, to give the dead peace, and the living a sense of control over fate. But the living girls are gone now. The red robes, the forced bows, the lifetime of servitude to a name on wood, those belong to the archives. Yet their echo remains in quieter ways. And grandmothers who still warn granddaughters, don't promise yourself too early. In village elders who glance nervously at unmarried graves during Qing festival. In the way some families still burn paper brides, tiny effigies in silk dresses, so their dead sons won't be lonely. The state outlawed minghun in 1949. The People's Republic called it feudal poison. The laws can ban rituals, but they cannot erase belief, and belief is patient. Back in that antique shop, the tablet gathers dust. No one bows to it. No one offers tea, but if you listen closely in the silence between the traffic and the haggling, you might almost hear the whisper of a 13-year-old girl, still kneeling on cold tiles, forehead pressed to floor, wondering if anyone will ever say her name. Not as a wife, not as a ghost, but as herself.